Hi everyone, it's Miss Rossi. Today we're going to be creating a landscape inspired by the work of Jen Aranyi. What you will be needing today is a white piece of paper. There should be one in your new packet of art materials that is labeled landscape, but any white paper will work. You can take the label off because we won't be needing that anymore. We're also going to need an eraser, a pencil, a Sharpie, and I'm going to use some watercolors today to add color. So I have some watercolor paints and I have a cup of water with a paintbrush, but you can use whatever you would like to add color to your picture. If you do not have watercolors at home, you can use markers, crayons, or colored pencils. You can even use other kinds of paint if you don't have watercolors, but you have acrylic paint or anything else. Today we're going to be creating a landscape of some mountains with some trees and maybe even a river. Now, when we looked at our artist's work, we saw her strong use of contrast and the way that she was blending colors in her sky. So we were able to see the contrast where her landscape, the actual land that she was drawing, was in black and white, and the sky was colorful and bright. So we're going to do something similar as we create our own landscape today, where our land is actually going to stay black and white, just drawn with some simple lines and shapes and then traced, and the background will be nice and colorful. To start, I am going to be holding my paper so it is tallest going up and down portrait style. And with my pencil, I'm going to draw some mountains going across my page. You can decide where on your paper you would like to draw your mountains. You want to make sure you have enough room to add the rest of our landscape, along with having some space to paint your sky. I think I'm going to go somewhere in the middle, and I'm just going to draw an irregular zigzag line. So it is going to have these big points all over, but they're not all the same size or the same shape. They're all a little bit different. Now we want to add some shadows on our mountains. So I am just going to go in and make a little wiggly line that is starting at the top of each mountain and then coming down to the side where it kind of comes down to a point. So starting at that top and then going back to the point. And I'm going to do this on all of them. They can all look a little different. They don't have to look the same. That first one is just going to go back to the edge of my paper. Now I can add even more details to my mountains to help make them look a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to carry some of these lines down. I'm going to make some of them a little bit longer than others for some of my larger mountains. And then some can remain shorter for my smaller ones. We can also add any other kinds of little cracks and things in the sides of our mountains where maybe we want to add an extra little shadow here and there. So I'm just doing a little organic shape in certain sections that I can fill in as a shadow later on. You can also just add some regular little lines here and there to add a little bit more texture to your mountain range. All right, I'm going to leave my mountains like that for right now, and I'm going to draw a line going across towards the bottom, separating my mountains from the rest of my land. And from this line, I'm going to add a river to my picture. So I'm going to pick a point where I want my river to end. So that is going to be the point where it's going to vanish into space. So it's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller from the bottom of my paper until it hits that point. Now, when we're drawing a landscape that we want to look realistic, we can think about size and the relation of objects in the foreground, middle ground, and background. So things in the background are going to be the smallest because they are furthest away from us, and things in the foreground are closest to us, so they are going to appear larger. So as I am drawing this river, my foreground is the area of my page closest to the bottom, and my background is where my mountains are. So where my river is getting close to my background, it's going to be smaller than when it's closer to the bottom edge of my paper in the foreground. And you can test this idea of things being larger as they are closer to you by holding your hand up to your face. The closer it gets to your face, the bigger it is going to look, and the further away it gets from your face, the smaller it is going to look. And you can see the same thing on the camera, where the closer my hand gets to the camera, the bigger it looks, and the further away, the smaller it looks. So we're having that same relationship on our paper. So where my river is closest to the mountains in the background, it's going to appear a lot smaller than it is all the way at the bottom edge of my page, which is our foreground. So from here, I am just going to draw a wavy line that is going to come out to the edge of my page. Now your line can look however you would like, but again, it is going to be smallest closest to that point. And now it is going to start to get larger as it is coming towards the edge of my page. So now I am drawing that same shape in a second line and having that space in between get bigger and bigger as I am approaching the edge of my page where my foreground is. So now you can see my river here is a lot bigger than my river all the way back in the background where that point was. And it is getting smaller as it goes back. We're going to add some trees to our landscape. If you want to add a little house or any animals, you can also do that. I'm just going to add some trees for now. And just like before, when we're thinking about the size of things that are closer to the background, closer to this line and to our mountains, are going to appear a lot smaller than things that are in the foreground closest to the bottom of my page. So as I am drawing my trees, I'm going to put small trees in the background and larger trees up here in the foreground. So right here, coming from the edge of my paper and going up, I'm going to have one of my largest trees, starting with just a simple straight line going up and then doing some lines coming off of it to make a little pine tree. And on my pine tree, my lines are going to be smallest at the top and then larger coming down to give us that big tree shape that we're looking for. And just like that, with the addition of my two trees here, you can already see space and distance, and it looks like there is more space on my paper since I have my small tree back there and my larger tree in the front to go with my river as well. So I'm just going to pop in a few more trees. Now, if you have any in this middle section, those are going to be more medium-sized in our middle ground. So they are not quite as small as our trees all the way in the background, but they are smaller than our trees closest to the bottom edge of our paper in the foreground. All right, and then just some other little details. I'm going to add a little shadow line on my river. So I'm just going to add like an extra line here to be almost like the edge of that river that we can still see. So you can kind of see the wall of the riverbank there in certain areas, focusing mostly on the areas in the front where we'd be able to see it. You can also add little water lines in your river if you'd like. You can add some rocks and things on the edge. Again, thinking about size and how things are going to be larger closer to the front and smaller in the back. And I'm also just going to add a couple little lines here and there to show some little mounds of, maybe I'm going to have a snowy landscape. So just adding a few lines here there is going to help us add some texture. That looks pretty good. I'm going to stop with my pencil, and as I'm tracing my picture, I'm going to start with my mountains, and I am just going to be tracing over all of my pencil lines. So very carefully, I'm going to go over the top of all of the pencil lines that I just drew, starting with my mountains and then going into my landscape. I'm even going to trace right over the top of those trees. Now, like I said before, we are thinking about contrast today. So we want our landscape to be in black and white, and we're going to have the sky in color. So they are going to have contrast. They are going to look very different from each other, and that is going to make our composition more exciting. So instead of coloring in our trees, we are going to be tracing them with our marker. So they are going to be mostly black. If you have any other decorations or details in your picture, again, you're going to trace all of those with your marker so we can make our landscape black and white. Now that I'm done tracing over all of my pencil lines, I'm going to go in and start to shade in my mountains. Now to do this, inside that section that we drew coming down from the top point over to the side, we are just going to draw some straight lines, nice and close together, to create a shaded area. Instead of coloring these in, we are just using lines to create our shadow, keeping them nice and close together while still having some white space showing. This is a type of shading called hatching, where you use lines to fill in a section instead of coloring it in. So I'm going to do this inside each section of my mountains where I have this little shadow space. And then I'm also going to do it inside these smaller little sections that we also drew to show some shadows and cracks inside our mountains. There we go. Now that I'm done with my marker, I'm just going to grab my eraser and erase any pencil lines that I can still see. And our landscape is almost finished. The only thing we have left to add now is our sky. And like we talked about before with our idea of contrast, we are going to make our sky nice and colorful, so it is very different looking than the rest of our picture, which is going to stay black and white. So now that I erased all of my pencil lines, I'm going to focus on that sky section with my watercolors. Now our artist liked to mix a few different colors together as she was creating her skies to create almost like a galaxy type effect. I think I'm going to do that, and I'm going to mix together some purples and pinks. Now I'm going to do a type of watercolor painting called wet on wet, where you wet your paper first and then you add your watercolors on top. This helps our watercolors blend together when we want to add multiple colors. So I'm going to get some pink and some purple in there, and since my paper was already wet, the watercolors are going to naturally start to mix together. As I'm adding watercolor to my picture, I want to make sure that I do not get any inside my mountains. So with my water, I am just going carefully around the edge so my color will not spill into those areas once I start to tap in some of my watercolor colors. You can pick whatever colors you would like for your sky. Yours does not have to look like mine. If you want it to just be one color, you don't have to blend all of your colors together either. Is my picture all finished. Once you're done with your project, you can let it dry and then upload a photo or a video of it on my Canvas page. I can't wait to see the beautiful landscapes you guys have created. Try your best, have fun, and get creative, and I'll see you soon. Bye!